Hi everybody, and welcome to another live stream. It's the 19th live stream that we've had, and it's so great. So many people already in the chat starting to ask lots of questions, which is really fantastic. So let me just do a couple of quick welcomes and all that kind of stuff to get going. I'm Gary Bembridge, and this, of course, is my channel, Tips for Travelers. Remember to switch the light on. And the objective of the channel is to make it easier to find, plan, and have incredible cruise vacations. If you are here live, really appreciate you being here live. Please leave comments in the chat, which I will bring up here. As always, I also use the my iPad because for some reason the questions come up more detailed. Bear in mind, for those of you who are watching this afterwards, not live, all of the content that we talk about in the next 60 minutes is driven by the people who are leaving comments. So that's how it shows. And if you are watching afterwards, really appreciate that. Remember, if there's a question you don't want to hear about, just keep flicking forwards and don't just stop watching. So a couple of things to start with, I thought, and then we'll get into the questions because there's loads coming in, and so I want to get going. First of all, I just want to point out a little book which arrived today, Cruising Interrupted, which Paul and Carol, who also here are in. It's a book by a guy called Paul Thornton. He wrote a book called The Joy of Cruising. This is a new follow-up book which is called Cruising Interrupted, which is stories around what happened when the cruising shutdown came. He was very kind enough to ask me to be in the book. I'm on page 200 and something, and Paul and Carol, who are also in the chat, on that. So I thought I'd just mention that that's now available on Amazon. So I thought I'd give a shout out for that. I haven't read the book because it literally just arrived today. So we'll get into that another time. Two quick things I want to talk about before we get into the questions. I've had loads of people contacting me saying that the CDC in the United States has cancelled all cruising until the 1st of November. Just to make it really clear, that is not true. And the way that a lot of the media reported it did confuse a lot of people. Basically what they've done is, after Clear and other people kept saying, let us sail, the CDC just reissued their position at this point in time, certainly publicly, which is that the framework for conditional sailing, which is due to expire at midnight or something on the 31st, or one before midnight on the 31st of October 2021, is still in place. And that has 4 stages to go sailing. Stage 1, crew, safety, getting testing in place. Stage 2, test cruises, which everyone's frustrated isn't happening. Then Stage 3 is lines apply for a license to sail. Stage 4 is they sail under a license. Of course, the CDC could accelerate all that by either dropping the whole order completely. It could also get scrapped if the country, President Biden decides, or whoever decides that there's no longer a pandemic, or one other reason, or they just decide to scrap it. So that's really important to note. Second thing to note is, meanwhile, while that's all happening in the US, and people are getting frustrated about no opening, the UK is, of course, steaming ahead with more and more cruise lines almost every day announcing sailings in sort of June, July, August, and into September. We have starting up P&O with 2 ships, Princess Cruises with 2 ships. We have Fred Olsen sailing. We have Celebrity have basically said they're discussing it. We pretty much know they're going to announce something next week. Royal Caribbean haven't said what they're doing. We have Disney announcing on Friday that they would be sailing MSC cruises. So there's a whole lot of cruises. Most of those are cruises to nowhere. Anyway, so someone asked me the question earlier on, very specific. Lou asked the question. Good to see you again, Lou. Lou asked the question, what cruises have I booked? Which of those UK cruises have I booked? Well, all of them are on sale yet, but I'll tell you what I am planning to do. Basically, when the cruises start, I'm going to go cruising 1 week, at home 1 week, cruise 1 week, at home 1 week, etc., right through until September. So I've booked P&O Britannia, which unfortunately is only a 4-night cruise. I will be booking, when it goes on sale on Wednesday, Cunard, Queen Elizabeth, that was the other line that's sailing. Then I will be booking after that, I already booked, Regal Princess, which I think is a 4 or 5 nighter. Then I will be booking Celebrity, because I think roughly I've had some strong suggestions about what they'll be sailing. Then I will be booking Fred Olsen, which is sailing up to the Orkney Islands. Then I'm basically at home a week, and then I'm due to be going to Norway on Cunard. So that's basically the plan. And of course, we keep hoping that that's going to happen. So I know I'm actually going to be meeting up with Paul and Carol on one of those cruises. I think it's the Regal Princess that we do to meet up on, because they're booking a couple. And if you are in the UK and you're looking at any of these cruises, on my website now, tipsfortravellers.com, there's a little section you'll see at the top called Cruise With Me. And I have links to all of the cruises that I'm doing, not only the UK ones, but right through until 2022. So if you ever want to be on the same cruise with me for whatever reason, and there, that's you can do that as well. So I'm going to do these questions, and I'll come, as I said, keep touching on the ones that come up here. So the JM129, always here asking loads of good questions, keeping me on my toes. One YouTuber thinks that cruising is likely to start earlier than we expect in the US. The president stated a few weeks ago there will be no large gatherings until July the 4th. The CDC deflects questions. Your take. So JM129, I'm guessing you're talking La Tony, I can never pronounce it, La Loco Lido, whatever. He brought a video out, which was a very interesting take on it. And basically what he's saying, for those of you who don't know, I haven't seen what he said, is he is a little bit like me. I think things are going to happen quicker than people think they are in the US, driven by the vaccine rollout. All the places that are opening up when vaccine rollout is moving pretty quickly. So UK, for example, whereas Europe are having to dial back now because vaccine rollout is pretty slow. I think the point, and also what he pointed out, is the Carnival Corporation has basically said they are going to focus, and with Carnival Cruise Line, they're going to focus on cruises out of US ports, and they said they're also not going to cancel June. So I think he is optimistic that things are going to accelerate. And Carnival certainly seemed quite bullish about sailing in the summer. Now, have they got connections? Don't they know? But certainly, as you mentioned, President Biden has spoken about after July, the US starting to open much more. And I think we might see some acceleration of that process. That still may mean, of course, that cruises only really start much later. So if you take the UK, for example, where they got the green light to cruise quite a while ago with the roadmap, most of those are only sailing in July, August, and into September. So even with the go-ahead, it's pretty late, just because of the timeline to get things up and running. So my take is I think there's probably much more pressure going on, but of course, the CDC, what's interesting, I think, is the decision for cruising in the US seems to be very much driven by the CDC, which of course, is, from my understanding, is really a health organization. Whereas what's happened in all those other countries, including the UK, the decision is not coming from the health, it's coming from the politicians. So it's, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, and his government, they've laid out an opening progress. One of the ministers, the Maritime Minister, has been integral in the discussions around opening of cruising. Of course, feeding very strongly into that, of course, is the health department. They set a lot of the rules around what's going to apply, like there's going to be testing, there's going to be whatever the rules are. But the decision is not the health decision to make. And I think that's a key difference for the US, and in other countries, Greece being the same as well. So I've probably gone on about that more than I needed to. Bill raised a point, which I do want to apologize for. Bill made a point that he watched my Alaska videos, and his Alaska trip got canceled. He watched Panama, and he got being a little bit confused between Panama and the Suez, but he's a little worried that watching my videos are dooming you to a life of no cruising. I guarantee they will not. So please definitely keep watching. So let's have a look. Let's go. Adrian, what's your program regularly from Australia? Great watching Australia. So you're probably, depending on where you are in Australia, you're up to 10 hours ahead of us or something. So it must be some godforsaken hour of the morning. So thanks for that. Watch the program regularly from Australia. Do you have any tips about cruising around Japan and China? So yes, I mean, cruising around Japan is definitely one of those things I have as a must do. It is a great experience, particularly if you've never been to Japan. Japan, certainly, when you first go there, and so I've been there as a land tourist when I was more for work, I used to go there. It does feel a little bit overwhelming because obviously, unlike in some other countries, English isn't necessarily that prevalent. The language is, visually is quite hard to understand, and it can seem quite daunting. So going on a cruise around Japan is a great way of doing it. What I would strongly recommend is there's different permutations of cruises, but the one I would really focus on with Japan is one that does some kind of full circumnavigation, or they tend to do sort of like a sort of a smiley face thing around Japan. So there's a couple of lines home port there. So you've got lines like Princess, for example, they home port there during the season. And that's fantastic because you normally embark from Yokohama, should I say, which is sort of next to Tokyo, very easy to get into Tokyo. And you will go to all the places, Nagasaki, you'll go to Osaka, so you can go to Kyoto, et cetera, et cetera. So you go and see, you're going to see Hiroshima, all those sort of places. And they will take you to all those places that you kind of want to see. That's what I would strongly recommend. The other option, if you do want to include China in those, because what those cruises do is they will go to South Korea, to Busan, island of Busan. I don't know, that's a little bit like the US. They have to go somewhere foreign. I notice they always seem to go to Busan. So that could be a rule. But if you do want to include China, what I would recommend is take a look then at some of the cruises that go out of Hong Kong. The cruises that go out of China tend to be very much focused on Chinese travelers. So, like, for example, Viking just set up a joint venture with a Chinese company, and is it Viking Sun they've sent? I can't remember which ship they've sent there, but so I would tend to avoid cruises that go out of China because it's very, very interesting, the Chinese market. But there are cruises that go out of Hong Kong. So I did one, for example, on Cunard out of Hong Kong as part of when they were doing their world tour. They'll sort of do a thing out of Hong Kong where they go from Hong Kong and they will call in Japan. They'll call at 5 or 6 ports in Japan. They will also go to Shanghai. They'll normally go to Taiwan, so it's great because you can go to Taipei and see the amazing stuff in Taipei as well. There's great sites to see in Taipei, really interesting history. And then they'll do Japan. So it's a 2-week cruise. So that's a good option if you want to see a bit of China, because really it is really only Shanghai, which is fascinating. They often have an overnight in Shanghai. So those are the two definite things to look at. Really a definite must. I would really like to go back and do Japan. So I've been kind of looking at that again. I really want to do that sort of round the hub. But the thing I was going to say is the great thing about that is, of course, then it gives you the kind of the confidence to move around and to learn the language and not learn the language, but kind of find your way around. One of the things, great thing about Japan is we do a lot of self-touring, and they have phenomenal apps which help you figure out the metro system and stuff, which is quite complicated, but it's pretty good. So Heather's got a question here. Heather's got a couple of questions, but let me see the one that popped up here. Question about timing. The final payment for my January cruise on Disney Magic is October the 24th. Wondering how that might affect me with October 31st expiration of the CDC order. Heather, I think it's going to be fine. So Disney Magic, by the way, for those who don't know, is the ship that Disney are going to be using for their staycation cruises, 2, 3, and 4 night cruises. But I think by the time we get to October and the lifting, I think you're going to find things are good. I think are likely to be running pretty smoothly. I mean, if you think about, and I'm guessing those cruises, if it's January, are probably Caribbean cruises. But I think by then we're going to find things have kind of clicked into place and aligned. So I would be pretty confident in terms of that. My kids don't want to cruise if certain things are still in place in January. That is a big question, of course. I think the point you're raising here, there is a good one, I guess, which is we still don't know by that late stage what the protocol is going to be on board. What the cruise lines are saying is very interesting. I use the UK as an example, is what all the cruise lines are saying is whatever exists on land, they will be replicating. However, they are also suggesting that they're likely to keep restrictions for longer. So we're talking, of course, the big things like masks, I guess, is one of the things. We're talking, social distancing measures, booking things, all those, no self-service, all that kind of stuff. I guess on Disney, they're doing socially distanced meet and greets and all that kind of stuff is what they'll be doing there. So a lot of it depends on what happens on land. I guess what we're seeing is the view, generally speaking, is once vaccination's much more prevalent, there is going to be some dialing back with use of apps and that kind of stuff. So I would imagine by January, I mean, if we're still wearing masks and all that kind of stuff, those in January, we're going to be doing it at sea without a shadow of a doubt. But I feel like things they should align much more. You're asking, I guess you're asking about the Japanese cruise with Kobe. No, we didn't actually, but you're right. I've seen quite a lot of the cruises do call in there. Monique is asking, do you think across the board for cruising, COVID vaccine be required to cruise again, expected to cruise in March 2022? Really interesting. I mean, this is, of course, one of those big hot button topics. What I think we're likely to see, since everyone's saying that COVID is going to be around for a while, we may be having booster vaccines, etc. Certainly what we're seeing And I think we will see increasingly as cruising resumes is that kind of focus on vaccines for adults now. Of course, as we move towards the end of the year, there is discussion around children being vaccinated as well. So I know certainly in the UK, lots of the trials, Moderna, I guess, which are also happening in the US, there's some discussion about the end of the year, certainly 12 to 18-year-olds may be vaccinated, depending on those trials. But I guess what we're seeing increasingly for international travel, which most cruises are, and certainly if you're cruising out of the US, leaving the US, is what increasingly has wrongly been called a vaccine passport, but those kind of apps which include either vaccine or test results or the, you've had COVID and recovering. I get a sense that those are going to be a key part of what we do. Whether expressly it's going to be a vaccine, it's hard to tell. So as cruising starts up, vaccines are a fundamental part of that. I think the cruise lines in the US have effectively conceded that, because the cruises that are starting up out of home porting in the Caribbean have vaccine for adults. In the UK, we're seeing that most of the cruise lines having vaccines. The only one that is not expressly having a vaccine is MSC Cruises, which are going to use their protocols from Europe. Disney, in their press release, kind of a little bit vague, and some of the journalists I know contacted Disney asking what is their policy, and they've said they haven't made a final call. Fred Olsen is also waiting for the final ruling on the government, so I think a lot of it will hinge around that. By March 2022, again, I think it's one of those things, if we're using a vaccine to travel internationally, cruising will have to have that. So it doesn't really answer the question. It's a little bit like vaccines as part of international travel feel like something we used to do. People remind me, actually, back, I think it was in the 70s, you used to have smallpox vaccine certificates, apparently, to travel internationally. So lots of people asking the question around vaccine for travel. We don't know. Certainly, as cruising opens, yes, is the very simple answer. And it's going to be very, very interesting as we see what the rule the CDC puts in place around vaccines or no vaccines. That's the one thing I'm particularly interested in. Now, Brian Rainsford, Princess have said they can't get the crew fully vaccinated. So Brian, let's see from the start, you're obviously one of the channel members. I really appreciate it, and thank you for being a channel member. Princess have said they can't get crew fully vaccinated. How important do you think this is? I think this is a really interesting challenge, because what have happened if different cruise line groups have taken a different stance on this. So Royal Caribbean have said that all of their crew have to be vaccinated before they can come and work on their ships, and they're trying to figure out how do they make that happen. They do also give some stats around how many of their crew had back in the Philippines or India or wherever had been vaccinated. So they have said they won't bring any crew back until they've been vaccinated. Some of the people that I follow who work for Royal Caribbean, of course, are now desperately trying to make sure that they can get vaccines so they can take advantage of some of these new positionings. However, as you're quite right, the Carnival Corporation has not yet made that a policy, because them getting their crew vaccinated is a challenge. So what we're seeing with the cruises that are starting up in the UK is all of them have an aspiration to get vaccinated, but they're not guaranteeing that crew are vaccinated. So they're putting in a whole other set of restrictions around crew and sharing of rooms, not sharing of rooms, frequency of testing, all that kind of stuff around the crew. I think the ultimate goal is to get the crew vaccinated, but I guess country by country are doing a different way. So my understanding, for example, in the Philippines, is it's doing an age-based rollout of vaccines. I know in the US, it's slightly different because they do have some frontline workers or maritime people with priorities. In the UK, it's strictly by age or people with medical conditions. So it's very difficult to have everyone vaccinated. So I think the aspiration, and ultimately, I think by the end of the year, we will see that all crew will, as part of their terms of employment, will be vaccinated. That's certainly where they are. Adrian's saying 4 a.m. in Australia up, but going to work. So thank you for watching before you head off. To work. So let's just take a look. Hypnotherapy asking, this is an interesting one. Had 6 cruises cancelled last year. We booked the Viking. So it sounds like are you on the Viking Venus one, the one that sold out before it went on general sale, and booking Cunard for the UK, which goes on sale on Wednesday. We have 2 more booked for October and September. Will they go ahead, do you think? This is a really interesting question. I'll tell you what I've done, because that might give a hint of where I'm coming. So I had cruises in June, July, and August. All of those cruises were existing cruises. They were all in Europe. I had a Viking one I had a celebrity one, and I had, oh my goodness, I've been changing so many holidays, I can't even remember what they are. Anyway, I decided that none of those had any chance of running, and I moved all three of those into 2022. However, I do have a September cruise on Cunard once they finish, which is actually on Queen Victoria, going to the Fjords. I'm feeling increasingly optimistic about those, because what we see is happening is, and it's very interesting. So if you look at those UK cruises, when they start up, as they head through July, through August, is they're all scenic cruising, cruises to nowhere, but it's now called scenic cruising as a nice way of calling it. Once we start heading right towards the end of August and into September, because many of them are running into September, so Sky Princess, for example, only starts up, I think, on August 30th, whatever. They're starting to have ports, but they are starting to have ports only within the UK. So some of them are looking at calling it like Liverpool, or because most of them are going up that way, parts of Scotland, Belfast, that kind of stuff. None of them are calling it other countries. So I think one of the things that I'm looking at is my September cruise is a Norwegian Fjords cruise. So it's basically leaving the UK from Southampton, sailing to Norway. A lot of those are sailing days, so sea days, scenic cruising, and only calling on Norwegian ports. So I'm very optimistic that that may be too strong. I'm pretty optimistic that will go, because it's only going to one country. So if these corridors are open, so if the EU, by then the EU will have introduced their green passport, they're calling it green certificate, where to move around, you have to have either vaccine or test results or whatever. That will be launched around about June or so time. Now, I know Norway's not in the EU, but they're going to follow whatever's happening. So, but it's only one country. So between the UK and Norway, they will be able to agree that's on a corridor or whatever. I think the challenge heading further afield is if it's multiple countries, I think that's going to be much more challenging. So it depends a little bit on your itinerary. For example, Greece is opening with Celebrity Apex. I think we have a very strong hint based on Twitter today that we'd like to see Norwegian announcing Greece as well, because they've posted a rather cryptic thing about Greek islands and Ouzos. But again, it's one country, and it's going to the islands, but it's within one country. So I think as we head into September, we're more likely to see where one country can control all elements of it, and the cruise line can control all elements. I think we're going to see that happening. And as we head further through that, bear in mind that in Europe, the vaccine rollout should be kind of finishing up. They're hoping to have offered all adults by that August, September time. So I'm feeling much, much more optimistic. I have an October Greek cruise that, again, which I'm very optimistic is going to happen. So Paul and Carol talked about the book I mentioned earlier, which it's too much shine. They're also, they've been reading it, so they're a little bit ahead of me, because it arrived today, and I haven't read it, so I'm very, very impressed. Hangman, I can see Port Canaveral from my window. Florida governor says bring cruise ship back to the USA. For those of you who didn't see it, it's actually worth having a look at, as the Hangman said. So very nice, Port Canaveral. But there was a seminar or meeting, whatever you want to call it, held on Friday with the governor of Florida, representatives from each of the big cruise lines that, of course, sell out of Florida. Of course, the three biggest cruise ports in the world are in Florida: Miami, Port Canaveral, and Port Everglades. And he was basically having a conference, a meeting, to basically rally the troops, as it were, around putting pressure on the CDC. So as part of that whole thing, and did suggest that he may even look at legal recourse. But certainly you're right. I mean, the Florida is really ramping up the pressure. There's definitely kind of a coordinated pressure, because we saw the travel agents came out one day, calling out, the next day Clear came out, and then the governor of Florida came out. So it feels to me a little bit like this campaign going. So there's definitely a big push going on there. So Heather asking a question about that. Heather's got her first vaccine. I've had mine just over a month ago. I had no effects other than a really sore arm. Martin had theirs about 3 weeks ago. Felt a bit rough one day. I've had more people on their second jab feeling a little bit rough. So, Paul, thank you for putting that out. I forgot to mention that. I should have written a list of all the cruises. Marella are going to also be offering UK cruises. Now, for those of you who don't know Marella, it's a very UK-focused line. It's part of the 2E Cruises group, or 2E Group, the big German listed, German-owned travel group. Marella is they've also said they're starting up, but they again, a little bit like the Disney announcement, it was pretty much just putting their rig in the hat and saying they're doing it. They didn't even say what ships, or other than it was going to be more scenic cruising. So we haven't seen any details for those. And I'm guessing also because they have to have negotiations with the various ports and timings, because obviously, Southampton has 3 or 4 terminals, but I guess they're going to want to manage numbers. So we haven't seen Marella, and I can't even remember when they said it was going on sale. Most of them seem to be talking about April. Certainly Disney was talking about April. See, he was talking about a cruise from June the 22nd out of Southampton. So I'm guessing that's one of the MSC cruises or something, because it's going to have to be one of those UK cruises, basically. So Miguel asking, so I need to have a slurp of my tea, which is my normal tipple that I have here, very wild. So Miguel asking, will MSC start in Miami in June, July, or after? Nobody knows, of course, the answer to that question. I mean, I guess they've got currently to June. It's going to so much hinge on what the CDC decides in terms of whether they drop the need for test cruises, which I think is unlikely, the timing of the test cruises. But certainly MSC are quite bullish about July. I've seen some of the stuff they're posting. Again, it's pretty optimistic. I think June seems very unlikely, even just if they get the go-ahead running test cruises. Because the time, if you look at the time, let's assume the CDC sticks with their process. By the time they issue the technical details, so we're now basically in April. So if they issue the technical details sometime in April, which they don't seem in a hurry to do, they're going to have to, the cruise lines are going to have to organize, get the ships stocked up, refilled, decide who's coming on the test cruise. So that's going to probably take a month at least a month, because some of those ships are stocked up. So we're talking into May. They run the test cruises in May. Then it takes 60 days before, which is the timeline before you can get the license to sail. So let's say by mid-May they've got them done. Then that's mid-June, mid-July. So we're talking kind of right towards the end of summer if all things go to plan. Interesting, Richard. Thank you, Richard. What about the Rotterdam cruise, the Baltic, September the 25th out of Amsterdam? Remember, I couldn't remember what the other cruise that I moved was. It was actually a Baltic cruise. It was actually on New Statendam out of Amsterdam as well. It was a 12-night cruise. I actually moved that into 2022. I think it seems, for me, by August, certainly heading to multiple countries. You're going to be calling on Finland. You're going to go to Tallinn. I guess you're going to St. Petersburg. It feels pretty complex to make that, to be able to do that. And also, I feel like a lot of the restrictions will be put in place. And a lot of those places, when one goes on tours, I think you really want to go out and be able to explore that properly. So, if those cruise line only excursions, which are very within the bubble, I felt I wasn't going to get the best experience. I was pessimistic it was going to happen anyway. Now, by September, will it be better? It's uncertain. We don't know what Russia's approach, of course, to letting cruise ships is going to be, to let cruise ships come in. To me, it feels a real stretch. September, you've got certainly time to hold on to wait for that final balance. I think we will get more of an indication soon around what those cruise lines are thinking for the summer and whether they're planning to bring ships around. So it would wait. For me, August was a definite no-go. September still feels a stretch for me personally, but of course, you definitely do have time. I want to talk a little bit about Cunard. We always love talking about Cunard. Mia's asking, do you recommend traveling by Queen Mary 2 during off-season now? I'm not sure if you're talking about the transatlantic or you're talking more generally. I'm assuming it's the transatlantic. Let me assume it's the transatlantic. I've traveled a couple of times in winter on the Queen Mary 2, and you need to be prepared for it to be pretty bumpy and pretty rough. However, the ship is designed to cope with those really big, powerful waves. Now, the first real proper trip I ever did, other than some little taster cruises, the first proper trip I did was on QE2, which you can't see, it's right at the top there. I should just swap these around, but bring QE2 down, which was a winter crossing. We had 50, 60-foot waves. The waves were crashing over the front of the ship. You had to walk in to move with the motion of the ocean, as it were. So if you are you do need to expect that it could be pretty rough. So the Queen Mary 2 can handle it. So I've done, I think, 2 crossings now in winter on the Queen Mary 2, and I would do it in a heartbeat. I was trying to convince my partner that we should do that amazing Queen Mary 2. They do a trip every year where they do a crossing to New York. They then go from New York on the 22nd of December every year down to the Caribbean. They spend Christmas, you do Christmas and New Year, and you come back, and then you can actually do a crossing back. So we've done the crossing that way the one time, and they did the crossing on the way back. The plus of it is you normally find you can get amazing deals. One of the reasons we actually did it, we originally booked the Caribbean thing, and we were like, oh my God, it's so inexpensive to do the winter crossing, because a lot of people don't want to do that winter crossing. So you get the whole Queen Mary 2 experience, you get it at a great price normally, and as long as you are not terrified of being seasick and you're quite, you've got pretty good sea legs, I think it's a fantastic thing to do. And there's a real sense of community and spirit because you're out there in the middle of winter. So I think it's, I think it's definitely something to do. I want to touch on, I just saw John talking about John Kelly. I was talking about my Norwegian cruise line PPC. I guess that's personal cruise consultant, and not to cancel my August cruise out of Miami. They have something in the works, whatever that means. John, it's really interesting point around Norwegian. Norwegian is up to something, and we will hear, I guess, imminently what they're doing. They took, I think I'm right in saying it's now 6 ships not out of service. They cancelled the cruises. They announced 3 or 4, and then they announced another 3. So I know Encore, Joy, I can't remember all of them, so I won't quote them all. I have in the community tab, I've published what they are. So they took a whole lot out of service right through till October, November time. And we don't know where they're going to be. They've put a couple of cryptic things out on Twitter. One talking about Bermuda, one talking about Hawaii, and one talking about Greece, I think, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. So clearly, and what they said when they took those out of service is that they were taking them out of service because they were going to have announced new deployments for those ships. So they're definitely up to something. I think we can expect that they're going to follow something along with Royal Caribbean. However, the only watch out I would say, John, is if you've got a cruise in August on a ship and they are able to do something, the risk is that it won't be that cruise, because all these new cruises that are starting up are new cruises working around all the restrictions. So, if you look at what Royal Caribbean's doing out of 2 islands, what Crystal are doing out of 1, what Celebrity are doing, they created a new cruise around what different islands were allowing and not allowing, who would let cruises to call. Bear in mind, all of those excursions there are going to be bubble excursions, so you won't be able to go and tour by yourself when you go to the Caribbean islands. I'm guessing that's right easy because they'll probably just take people to beaches or whatever, have some sort of beach space allocated, which will be great. But bear in mind that actual specific cruise may not run, but it's interesting you see that they are definitely up to something. And I think we will see, hopefully this coming week. And of course, people in the UK are hoping that one of those ships will actually be one of the ships that they have out of the UK. Yes, some people making about how many trips I'm doing. It's very interesting because I've got, I am making up for lost time. Excuse me. One of the things that I figured is like this, we have such a unique opportunity in the UK with the pace of the vaccine rollout. We've had, this quite a long, we've had a couple of lockdowns. With this lockdown we've had basically since December, which really is running all the way through pretty much till May and into June. So it's been pretty strict to try and drive numbers down. Vaccine has been phenomenal, the pace that it's rolling out. And so now we've got a chance to get the dividend from all of that. And these cruises are there. I just feel I should take advantage of them. The reason I spaced them out, by the way, which is interesting, I'm trying to get more confirmation on it, is buried in the small print is you have to leave 7 days between cruises. So they've stopped people booking back-to-backs, for example. And I think that could be around some of the COVID things, because you're going to have a PCR test, I'm guessing, before you go, and you have to do that so many days before or whatever. So I've had to spread it out anyway. And it's been interesting making the choices. But you're right, I also want to catch up. And one of the things I desperately want to do, obviously, is get out, the excuse I'm using, to get out and be able to show people what it's like, to cruise with the restrictions, and basically be able to make new videos with new footage and new stories. So yes, absolutely, definitely catching up. Hetty's saying, cruise with Gary, how fun. We'll take a look at your schedule. Yes, please do. I'm not sure that I'm that much fun. I don't drink, for example, so you're not going to find me stumbling around drunk in the middle of the night in the nightclub if you're even allowed to, even if you're even allowed to do that. But I'll try and be fun. Paul and Carol, we've cruised with very briefly. They can probably tell you whether I'm fun or not. Heather making the point about traveling to Europe. That is a fair point, is we don't know around opening up. And I think, Heather, that's a very good watch out point, is will people be allowed to travel with the situation? Now, as you may or may not know, Europe is heading into a third wave at the moment. Pretty scary numbers. The UK had that earlier in the year with that UK variant or Kent variant, that the UK government keeps trying to not call it the UK variant, call it the Kent variant, or B117, as they're also trying to get people to call it. Basically, so we had huge numbers, but that's now really hitting Europe at that time. And I think you're right, there is not clarity around when borders will open. Europe even started to lock borders between each other. So Germany, for example, even if you're traveling within Europe, you have to have a COVID-19 test, even if you're a European citizen moving in, they close the borders. So you're right, that's definitely a big issue. A technical question. Let me do a slightly technical question, which is a good different topic to talk about. Do you use a gimbal to film on board? So I use all kind of different things when I'm filming. I do use a gimbal. For those, I haven't got it here. Those of you who don't know what a gimbal is, that thing that sort of stabilizes. I also use a little Osmo Pocket, which is a tiny thing. It's about this big. It films in 4K, which has a built-in gimbal thing, which is more discreet. So I use that. So unlike a lot of other vloggers, they go full in for the big old song and dances, these big cameras and big gimbals. I kind of go small, and because I think it's more, also it's easy to carry around, and it's also much less threatening for people, I think, if you're just videoing and whatever. So I use a gimbal, I use a tripod, but increasingly playing around with a gimbal so you can get more moving shots, etc. One of the things I'd written up, which I've never put actually in my videos, is a list of the actual gear I use, because a lot of people ask sometimes, like, what lights do you use or what cameras are you using? And so I've actually just changed all my cameras recently as well. So Jane giving me a thumbs up. Well, that's always nice. Thank you. Good to have a thumbs up. What's very interesting, actually, talking about thumbs up and thumbs down, as you know, on YouTube, you can like and dislike videos. One of the things that's very interesting is almost always before the live stream goes live, before it's actually gone, it'll have a thumbs down, which is interesting. So not sure why people don't like that when you're doing a thumbs down. So it's very interesting. You'll often find, when I release a video, and I'm sure other people like Paul and Carol, other people who have videos, you'll find, the video will go live, and you can see it go live on your dashboard stuff. And say the video is 5 minutes, 10 minutes long, but like about 20 seconds after, you'll have a couple of thumbs down. Some people just like the thumbs down. So thumb down is always really, really great. So let me go back. One of the things people have said, I scroll back to, people were talking about canceling, not canceling. A lot of people are saying that they want to wait because obviously if you cancel, if the cruise line cancels, you will normally get a bonus of 25%. That's a great thing to do. I would say there's actually an even better, if you can wait and it's not kind of an even better thing than the 125% is the lift and shift option. So look and see if your cruise line has the lift and shift option. This is really, really important. One, it's much better than onboard credit, than future cruise credit. Is clearly, if the cruise lines are giving everyone 125%, as a skeptic, you could argue all they're going to do is increase the price so that they basically knock out the effect of the onboard credit. So effectively, they just up the price, and you've paid them 100. They say, right, here's 125, but they charge you 125 when you're trying to use your 125. So I think, when you look at some of the pricing ahead, you're seeing a little bit of that. What's much more important So a couple of cruise lines have done. I've had it now with Viking when I moved, with the Celebrity when I moved, and it didn't quite happen with the Holland America one. They don't do quite the same thing. But what they do is they will offer to match the pricing that you've paid, and often will move your benefits. So really, really important. Check till you're booking cruises now, look and see if that happens. So what they do, so for example, I'll give you an example of Viking. So I had the Viking cruise, which was from Venice down to Athens, and it cost me, let's say, 100. So what happened was I decided I wanted to change that, which you can do. I wasn't going to wait for them to cancel it because I wanted they were only replicating that cruise at a time next year that I could do. So what my travel agent was able to do is say, okay, Gary's booked this cruise, it cost 100. You're running the same cruise in March. I was going in June, but they're running the same cruise in March. Same itinerary. Will you give him the same cabin, keep the extra onboard credit, whatever other perks that were included, and basically match the price. So you'll move him, even though it's showing a higher price as a list price online, and they match the price because I was moving to exactly the same cruise. What Celebrity are offering, because they actually canceled the cruise because they've moved my cruise, which is on Celebrity Apex, they've converted that into one of their Greek cruises. But what they said is you can either get a full refund, cash, you can get 125%, or if you book the same, if you book basically the same cruise you had within a 4-week period either side, they will match the average price per day. So if you were paying 100 and you're going on a 4-night cruise, so that's 25, oh, that's right, they would guarantee that if you booked a cruise roughly the same, roughly within 4 weeks' time, they would match it. That to me is much more valuable than 125%. So definitely take a look at that and increasingly ask your agent before you book, if that's the case. But also, even if you've got cruises that you're not sure about, ask your agent or yourself, obviously if you booked yourself, what is that policy in place? But also just chance your arm. So for example, I know what Sarah Bolton, who's my travel agent, did, basically asked Viking, just for them, said, look, it's the same cruise, same itinerary, will you match the price? So definitely, I think that's much, much more valuable. So let's go. Other people don't drink either, so that's good to know. So we can all have fun not drinking at the same time. Paul and Carol said, you're definitely fun, we laughed a lot. I guess one of the most telling things is we were hoping to try and do 2 cruises together when they came up. Unfortunately, I can't, I'm moving the Cunard one, so we can only do one cruise together. So let me talk about river cruising. So a question here, a couple of questions on river cruising. Oh, it's like a tea. Even my tea is caffeine free because I drink rooibos, so very wild. So Diana said, I have a Central European river tour scheduled with Tauk, late October. Things are still tough there with the virus. Thoughts? That's very interesting because river cruising are, and I saw this thing with Rudy Schreider from Ammer Waterways again just yesterday with his view. I think river cruising, sorry, and I also listened to an interview with Ellen, I've forgotten her surname now, who runs UniWorld. Anyway, you're right, things are pretty tough in Europe, probably will be for a while. However, what the river cruising heads are saying is they think that they will start perhaps some domestic cruising sometime May, June time, so Germany for Germans only or whatever. But they are still thinking that they will be able to get some cruising for international guests towards the end of the year, because they are still of the view that Europe will open much later in the year. The point they made, and what Ellen, begins with a B and I can't remember her name, was saying she can turn on, her crew and people and staff, they can turn a river cruise ship around within 10 days. So if she decides today that they're going to start sailing, within 10 days, she could start have guests on board that ship because all the crew are local. They can basically drive there. The way that they're stocked, ships are stocked, it's all done on the fly, on the go anyway. The ships are all, depending on the cruise line, they're all, for a lot of them, for example, UniWorld are in Linz, and across Europe, a lot of them in parts of France. So they can just basically move those ships around. So they can turn them on really quickly. Ocean cruising can take up to 12 weeks, which is one of the reasons it's taking one in the UK. So certainly if Tauk and other companies find that, towards the middle of the year, things are moving, things are opening up, they can turn that on really, really quickly. So I think, and they desperately, of course, want to be sailing. Will all the ships be sailing? They're saying no, because they just don't think there'll be enough people in demand. So, but they will certainly, I would be kind of optimistic for that time. Again, there's no certainty because a lot of it hinges around travel opening, but certainly they're feeling quite optimistic, and Rudy Schreiner was being much more optimistic. Taka is a company, by the way, I've never cruised with. I've only toured their ships, but heard really great things on them. So someone's asking me about Atlas. Oh, sorry, someone asked me about Atlas, and I've missed it. I'll try and come back to that. I did see a question about Atlas. I don't know a lot about Atlas, but I did actually get something from the other day. Yeah, Paul and Carol making the point. Thumbs down come really quickly, and you're right. It's very easy to get hung up on it, but you realize it's just people doing what they do. Do you book? Here we are. Andrew asked, do you book cruises with a broker or direct with the cruise line? I book all my cruises and have done now, not massively long, but maybe about a year or longer with an agent. And I'll tell you why I do that. So originally I used to do it myself because I liked doing it and I had time to do it. So I'd like to put it, all together myself and the flights and everything. But as we head in, and only with more complex trips, so like Antarctica trip, for example, I booked with an agent, like a polar region expert. So I booked that with Polar Routes, for example, ROUTS, Polar Routes, just because it was all things like it was flying into Montevideo and hotels and transfers, and it was flying back from a Shire, and then there was a charter flight, and so it was just much easier. And as experts are talking about which is the right cruise line and stuff, so getting their kind of expertise and knowing that they know all those things. But as we head into the pandemic, I sort of thought, and also I was lucky enough to be doing quite a few cruises and stuff, but actually I realized when things started getting cancelled, it's very complicated. And I was on a trip, which actually was a trip I was invited to do by an actual travel agency, asked me to go on a trip with Windstar Cruises to cover some stuff, do some video for them about Windstar, and write a few bits and pieces about Windstar. And we had a big problem on the cruise. Well, the cruise didn't have a problem, but we ended up in Greece, and the Greek traffic controllers were going on a week-long strike. And it was a nightmare because they kept chopping and changing when they were going on strike. And what I saw is everyone on the ship was running around like crazy, trying to sort it out, bad Wi-Fi, phones, connections, and it basically ruined the last couple of days. But because I had a travel agent, all I had to do is I sent them a message saying, this is happening. In fact, they sent me a message even before I did, saying, oh, by the way, we've seen there's a thing, don't worry, we'll sort it out if necessary, we'll sort out to get back, blah, blah. So I just then actually went off to the beach and had a lovely time on the beach when everyone was running around like crazy. So that was kind of my first idea, when things go wrong. So now I book it all through a travel agent, Sarah Bolton, who's part of Travel Council, so she's an independent person. And it has been an absolute dream through this whole pandemic period, because basically, like with those 3 things I changed this week, I just had one conversation with her saying, okay, I want to do this, this, and this. And she then sorted it all out, changed flights, changed bookings, changed transfers, and just sorted it out. And really importantly is her price is at worst the same as if I went direct. And it's just been, so I now do it all through an agent. And also, I wanted to do it through an agent because clearly agents have been hammered. Like Sarah was telling me, she has not earned one single pound since March 2020. In fact, she had a negative salary at the end of March because they'd been paid commission, which they had to pay back because so she's not earned. So I also wanted to sort of support people. I know other people like Paul and Carol, they use somebody else who's also with travel counsellors and stuff. So I always book it. Gavin and Luke are here, which is great. Gavin and Luke, I think, have the same problem with their thumbs down. Gavin and Luke, holidays at sea. They use their phone a lot. They do a lot of stuff around, particularly UK cruising, P&O. And I think I'm right in saying that they haven't booked, what I've seen, any of those cruises yet because they're not as old as some of us, and I don't think they've had their vaccinations because you have to have vaccinations to go. But definitely, worth checking out their stuff, particularly if you're interested in some of the P&O stuff. So here are the Hangman making the point about the lift and shift over future cruise credit. Good to hear someone else agrees. Right, wow, 400%. So you're right, there's some big kind of inflation happening in pricing, because pricing is a little bit all over the place at the moment. So it's definitely thing. I saw that as well. Heather made the point about Tony Laliderka. I was wondering whether it's one of those things, because actually if you tap twice, it unnegatives you. So I quite liked it as well. So basically you'll find if you tap your dislike twice, it dislikes you and then undislikes you. So I thought that was quite good. Johnny the Kanak, love your work. Great to hear that. Thank you very much. Can't wait for the service so I can come back home to the UK. So are you stranded somewhere? That was one of the things I've seen lots of people, particularly Australians, are struggling with that. Friends of ours from Australia who can't get back to Australia because of that whole hotel quarantining thing. Kimberly, it's funny, I was actually working on a video. What's the name of the website to monitor cruise price fluctuations after you book? What I recommend, one of the things I recommend to a lot of people is once you've booked a cruise, to input into these sites, and then they send you alerts. And Kimberly, I can't remember. I will put the names of the sites in the notes of this video. I think one is called no, I can't remember the two names. Two sites that are fantastic. You put your cruise in, and these are the two free sites. There's some that you can pay for. So you put your exact cruise in, and then every time the price changes, they let you know if price goes down, and they'll also tell you if the grade above changes, and it's definitely worth doing. So if you see price go down, I've had some success with that, where when I was doing my own bookings, is I'd contact the cruise line and say, look, I can see that you're now selling this balcony cabin grade I'm in for X amount less. So what will you do? And you'll often find they won't give you the money back, but they might give you extra credit, or they'll offer you some sort of upgrade and something. So Kimberly, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of this. I don't know why it's gone. Frozen. Oops, sorry, I froze there for a second. I didn't realize I was like. Monique making the point as well that Carnival have definitely been, is it Caroline Duffy, who's their CEO, who did a video on Friday, is being a little bit vague / cryptic as well, which is very interesting, which makes me think, which I guess the one that Tony was making, that something around that is something like that is happening. Do you think the cruise lines sailing around the UK will have curfews on board? Derek, I don't think so. I don't think there will be any curfews. I mean, there's no curfews on land, so I don't think there will be curfews. I guess what will be more likely is restrictions around how many people can in the venue at a time. I think the other thing we'll see is very unlikely you're going to find things like big sail away parties or deck parties, or big events like captains' cocktail parties. If they do have them, they're going to be very small. So that will certainly dampen some of those kinds of things. Will the nightclub be open? I'm not sure if it will be. For example, it's not clear if things like that will be open. Obviously, they will be allowed to open on land by that stage. So I don't think there will be curfews as such, but there will be things. So people are talking about Shipmates. Now, Shipmates is one of those. It's not the one that I've used, but you're right. Shipmates is one of those that does. It's not the one that I've used, so I don't have a lot of experience with that. But I know a lot of people do that. Yeah. So Gavin just saying they're just waiting for the vaccines before they book, because you have to have both vaccines before you can go. So any info more? Okay, a lot of people have asked me this question around 2022 world cruises, and the cruise lines have been relatively vague about those. I know a couple of people that have actually decided to move their world cruise from 2022 to 2023 because they're concerned about what the protocols might be, but they're also particularly concerned about the itinerary, because a lot of these cruises obviously go to pretty exotic, out of the way places, so it's really unclear whether those itineraries are going to run. The only thing that I've ever seen about 2022 World Cruise is a couple of the cruise lines saying they may have to review kind of the itineraries and what they look like. So that's the only information I'm really interested to see, and I don't think we'll see anything, for a while. Tracy asks, have you ever done the ship within a ship experience? Would you try it? So for those of you who don't know, I'll just explain it very briefly, and I'll give you the answer is yes. And yes is the short answer. So ship within a ship is a concept which a couple of lines have. So you've got that on MSC. I think it was one of the early ones to do it. You've got Norwegian with the Haven and stuff doing that. So what they do is they basically have the, kind of their premium cabins within a certain area. Now, depending on the layout of the ship, they may have the dining room in that area. Some, like on MSC, and some of the ships you have to go to the dining room in a separate part, because normally dining rooms tend to be towards the back of the ship because that's where the kitchens and things are. But anyway, so the ship within the ship is a sort of a card-controlled area where the premium stuff is. So you'll often have, like the Haven on Norwegian will have their own swimming pool. They have a lounge, a bar, the dining room, and it's a very nice experience. You do feel kind of really special, and it's particularly nice because it tends to be on those very big ships, or the big MSC ships, or the big Norwegian ships. So what's very nice is you do have a slightly less frantic area. You do feel very pampered. You do feel very special. They're very beautifully decorated. But then you just sort of go through that door and you're into the kind of, you're stepping out into, the more full-on, the entertainment. You still have all of the benefits. So you have almost the benefit of being a smaller, intimate ship, but on your doorstep you have the big theaters with the big shows. You have the go-karting or whatever. So I would really recommend it. It is a very, 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 very nice experience. So Linda, this is something that causes people a lot of heartache. I took the credit last year and rebooked for October 2021. If this cruise is cancelled, will I get my money back or another credit? Unfortunately, you will only get credit back. So one of the things that was sort of buried in the terms and conditions was, once you have taken the credit, you forfeited the right to get your money back. There is one key exception, though, is if you booked a cruise with a French cruise line, so you booked on Ponant or Cross Europe or one of those, they actually changed consumer law in France, which to help protect cruise lines and travel companies from basically having a lot of big cash outflow, is they said you could only get a credit certificate, but if you hadn't used it, now I can't remember the date, but I think at that time it was end of 2022, because I thought, oh my God, that's so far away. You could then get cash. So pretty much, now there are one or two exceptions, but pretty much if you've taken the credit, you can't get it back. And I've listened to a couple of podcasts and heard various legal people talking, because the same is true with airlines as well, is once you've accepted it, you can't get it back. Now, even one of the things I was trying to work out, because Norwegian Cruise Line Group, so they obviously Oceania, Regent, and of course Norwegian, they have moved from giving future cruise credit. So when they cancel, they now give people cash back. They're not giving future cruise credit. But from what I've seen from people who've had the similar situation, is they're not giving cash back. Now I'll keep an eye on that. If anyone's had any other experience, then that's different. But no, is the short answer. I've seen a couple of questions around around the casino. As casinos are not normally open on board until ships have left the UK water, as in other ports, do you think they'll be open on UK cruises? It's interesting because someone else asked this question, and I did mean to find out and I forgot. So I will actually find out if the casino is going to be open, because you're right, you have to be out of waters, but you don't have to be that far out. But I guess particularly where they're sailing, you're going to be kind of not that far out. I'm trying to remember, certainly when I have been on those mini cruises, so I've been on cruises, there's ones where you go from, say, Southampton to Zeebrugge or Le Havre or whatever. The casino has opened overnight on those. So I'm guessing the casino will be open. I'm hoping the casino's open. I love the casino. So it will be interesting to see. I'm guessing there will be, but I will find out very specifically whether they'll be open. Of course, a lot of them will have lots of restrictions. So on MSC stuff, they have alternative machines, lots of issues around using chips and not using chips. So it'd be interesting to see if with the protocols they do or don't have them. Billster asking, great avatar there, whoops. Have you been booked as a guest speaker on the cruise? No, I haven't. Although I did actually get onto cruising by talking on a ship, but it wasn't a traditional cruise. So I was asked originally when my job when I worked full time was in marketing, and when I was the marketing director for Johnson & Johnson in the UK, a company used to sponsor ships, charter ships, sorry, and they used to hold marketing conferences on. It was kind of like a selling marketing thing on, and I was asked to go and talk on the ship, which was like, don't want to do that. I don't want to go on a cruise. I'll go. And that's how I got into cruising originally. But I was doing a marketing talk rather than anything else. So I haven't. No. I do know Chris Frame. If you're interested, Chris Frame, who has a YouTube channel which is called Chris Frame. He focuses a lot on Cunard. He does a lot of talking on Cunard ships, about Cunard history and stuff. So he does a lot of talking. I haven't been asked to talk, and I guess I don't know if I would do it actually, because I really want to go and do my videoing and stuff. But no, I haven't. That was actually that. So I've actually answered two questions at once. So that was my very first cruise, which was in 2005 on P&O Aurora, which was that thing where I was doing, the talk. So let's have a quick squidge through and make sure. Let me just dial back, because I always feel bad when I go back and look at the comments afterwards, where I realized, because I've seen things coming up and I've missed some really important questions earlier. So I feel really bad if people have left questions and then left them out. So someone's asking, how strict are kids club age ranges on Sky Princess? We're going to travel with a 2-year, 7-month-old. Would they consider including them in the 3 years? They are, mostly kids clubs are pretty strict on the age range. I think once you get into the 7 months, 8 months, there may be some leeway there, but they tend to be quite strict. A lot of it also hinges on how many kids they've got, talking to the kids clubs, because if it's going to be very full, they are more strict. If it's less, so they are a little bit more fluid. So it does depend a little bit on those kind of other sort of factors. Kebi's asking about videos on up and long haul flying at the moment. I need some guidance about flying to Oz next February. I did one video just more generally about things. So I might look at it when I do something around heading back out to sea, because this is part of that. I guess it's part of that whole thing. So let's have a quick see if I've left anything out. Have I left anything out? I think I've managed to cover. See, I got another question come in. So James has asked, there I found the Atlas Cruises. Atlas Cruises, my World Navigator new operation. Do you know anything? Booked Antarctic Solar Eclipse Cruise. Now, I don't know a lot about them. I've seen the ship, which looks fantastic. And I actually was on a webinar, I think I might have mentioned it last week, which was, it was actually not for Atlas, but it was about the solar eclipse in Antarctic trip. It was basically with Intrepid, which does look to be a phenomenal experience. There's going to be a full solar eclipse in December. I can't remember, it's quite in December, but their ship looks fantastic. I do not know a lot about that. I did see Dave Monk write about them, so you might want to check that out. Dave Monk, he's called Ship Monk. If you look for him on Twitter, or certainly if you just Google him, he did write something about them, so he might actually be able to help out as as well. He'll definitely know much more, because he did cover those. So let's have a quick look. Heather, yeah, Chris Frame's very interesting. Lots of stuff around history. He's done lots of stuff around restocking ships and remanning ships and stuff. Richard, I'm a little bit late to the party. Better to be late than never, as they say. Has been asked, will you need passports? Yes. You have to have a passport to go on the UK cruises. I guess because you're actually leaving the UK, although they're counting them as domestic cruises. But also the passport, I guess, is such a definitive ID, but you absolutely do need a passport. So that is definitely in part of the rules and regulations. So the hour's up. We've actually gone over the time. I thank so much for all of these questions. I think I've answered most of them. If I didn't, I will have a look through. I spotted one. You can't use future cruise credits, by the way, across different links. So someone's asking, they've got Norwegian future cruise credits they want to use on Oceania. No, unfortunately, you can't. Thanks so much for joining. So many people join. I hope I've answered your questions. give me something to think about. I have a video out tomorrow, which I'd love you to watch, which is around river cruising. So watch that. But if not, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a really great time. And soon, hopefully, we'll be saying happy sailing. Thanks again.